like to work, and ingenuity. So ibig sabihin how the quality of labor or the how you know how productive that laborer is. So in a laissez-faire economy, kung there are no these I call them noises, no, these noises aren't present, then everyone should have a fair and equitable distribution of income and wealth. Okay, all right. So that ends chapter 12, and we can start chapter 13 now, which is the more exciting, at least in my view, the exciting chapter about labor. Exciting ito kasi labor market is made up of people like all of us. So, and people are productive inputs that fuel the ability of households and individuals to improve welfare. So, in my view, the labor market is interesting because we are all part of the labor force. I mean, you're not right now because you're students. So some of you might be part-time um, participants in the labor force, or a part-time member of the labor force. But eventually, all of us or all of you will become a member of the labor force. So it's rather interesting, at least from my perspective, or baka naman nerd lang ako, uh, how the market and how economics helps you understand why you're getting paid that much, why you're not getting paid as much as another person, etc. No? So what are the drivers of um, income? What are the decision points of an owner of labor? How when it comes to supplying labor? Okay, let's a few things that need to be understood first. There's called real wage versus nominal wage. Nominal wage represents money wages earned at a particular point in time. Example, your allowance, your monthly paycheck. Those are nominal wages. Now, if you take out inflation, the nominal wage becomes what we call real wage, which represents, parang real, totoong wage, which represents the wage or the purchasing power of an hour or day's work. So there's a difference between nominal wage and real wage, because the nominal wage tells you that this is how much you're making. The real wage, let's say you're making 100, let's say you're making 20,000 pesos. The real wage tells you what is the purchasing power of your nominal wage. Okay, now the reason that we have make this distinction is because 20,000 now is different from 20,000 during the 1970s. So nung 1970s, kung kumikita ka ng 20,000 pesos, sobrang yaman mo. No? Ngayon, kapag 2021, which is how far ago is 1970? Let's say 1971. That would be 50 years ago, no? So kung 50 years ago, 20,000 is a lot of money. 20,000 is probably, the cost to buy a house and lot. Whereas now, 20,000 is just salary. So kung sumusweldo ka ng 20,000, ang nominal wage mo ngayon is 20,000. At ang nominal wage ng 1970 is 20,000. They're not the same. So what do we do in order to compare? We take out the inflationary effects. So yung capacity, yung rate of increase of prices, because that will determine whether the purchasing power is the same or not. Obviously, it's not. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of reasoning to understand that 20,000 now is different from 20,000 50 years ago. The difference is that if we take out the inflationary rate for the last 50 years, your 20,000 is probably going to be around, in 1971 prices, is probably going to be around maybe 300 pesos. 300 to 400 pesos noong 1971. All right. So if you divide nominal or money wage by the cost of living, which is normally measured by the consumer price index, if you take out the effect of inflation, you will arrive at real wage. So if we compare the real wage in 1970, it's probably going to be 20,000 is probably going to be 300 pesos in 1971, and so that they can become equal. Yun yung ano nila, yun ang kanilang way, or that's the way to compare the income between two time periods. No? So ano naman kaya yung in terms of 2021 prices, what is 300 pesos? 300 pesos is, what can you buy with 300 pesos? A lunch. So probably in terms of value, 300 pesos, which is 20,000 pesos in 1971, is only, sa atin, is on, sorry, 20, yung lunch in 300 pesos, how do you compare that? Ang 300 pesos ngayon versus 300 pesos noong 1971, probably 10 pesos lang yon pambili ng lunch. Baka nga less pa eh. Kasi I'm trying to remember, 1971, kano ba baong ko? So, ibig sabihin sa baong ko noon kasama na yung pambili ng lunch ko. Piso lang yata yun kasama lunch, o 150 ba yun? Kalimutan ko na. Pero probably, baka hindi pala 10 pesos, malaki pa yung 10 pesos. Oo nga, kasi 10 pesos noon, ano na eh. Ano ba nabibili? Nakakabili ka na ng grocery ng 10 pesos yata. So anyway, the point is that there's a difference between real wage and nominal wage. Okay, so both in trends in the labor market now, there's a rise in both the nominal and real wages. Now, how come? Malaki pala ang real wage. So this is due to the advent of technological changes that have pushed labor productivity up. Diba sabi natin the determinant of wage is the productivity of labor. But technology has been rising in the last 50 years since the 1970s. So which means that marginal product of labor, marginal product of labor, and the marginal revenue product of labor is rising, or has been rising since the 1970s because of technology, which has increased the productivity of labor. So ibig sabihin, yung real wage, even if nominal wage has obviously risen, say the inflation nga, so all wages are adjusted for inflation, so depending on how high prices are. But it turns out that when the real wage is calculated, the real wages have also been rising, and this is due to the fact that people are more productive. So the Industrial Revolution has increased productivity, so that has changed the real wage from pre-industrial revolution to post-industrial revolution. Mas mataas ang wage, partly because of productivity, and also as a result of higher productivity, there's also the result of that, of tumaas ang labor. There's also this, because of industrial revolution, there is now a higher demand for labor in the industrial sector. So yung labor from the agricultural sector, this is worldwide. The labor from the agricultural sector starts to migrate to the industrial sector. So yung countryside economic activities nagko-compete na also for labor, and as a result, in general, the wage rate of all laborers has been rising, both from the agricultural sector and the industrial sector, because as a result of industrial revolution, tumaas ang productivity ng laborers, tumaas ang real income sa industrial sector. So nagma-migrate ngayon yung mga laborers from the rural areas to the cities, to the urban areas. Sa result, nagkakaroon ng competition for labor, tumaas din ang labor ng rural areas dahil doon. Nang papansin lang natin, not quite the same for the Philippines, but that's another story altogether. So productivity of labor rises as workers have more or better capital goods to work with. So as a worker with work. So main emphasis dito is that productivity rises when you have better capital and more capital to work with. As an example, a worker with a shovel is less productive than a worker with a crane or computerized equipment. I mean, hindi mahirap isipin that someone who has, computer computer-based machines na let's say for production is bound to have better quality and more quantity of output than a worker who's only using a shovel or only using hand tools. All right. The marginal productivity of better trained workers will generally be higher than less trained workers. So this emphasizes productivity again, and as we described, productivity is a function of uh, training, investment in human capital, education, etc. So better trained workers will have higher marginal productivity than less trained workers. That's also not hard to imagine, and something that I think through gut feel is true. So observations: the higher productivity of labor working with better capital goods partly explain why wages and living standards in the United States have risen in the 20th century. So the book kasi was obviously written by an American. So ang kanyang example, which is a good example in any case, so it just illustrates how capital goods or working with more and better capital goods could result in higher productivity, and which in turn results in higher wages and living standards for Americans. So the one observation is that the United States, has accumulated huge amounts of capital goods, such as, and they've built railroads, they built infrastructure, communication infrastructure, etc. That this has, because of this accumulation of capital goods, that the productivity of the American worker has risen throughout the 20th century, which is also spilled over to the 21st century. Also, it's been observed that Americans have become more literate, better educated, and better trained. They revised, they become more, more conscious of education, and pretty much all Americans are literate. So they're generally better educated and better trained, which, according to theory, which we also discussed earlier on today, is or contributes to the productivity of labor. So as a result, the skill of American workforce is substantially more than before. So when you say skills substantially more, it just means that they're more productive than before. So the higher education and skills, the higher the productivity. And I guess that's the bottom line of the discussion. Recall also that the demand for labor demand depends on the marginal product of labor. And so the question is, how does the marginal product of labor improve? That is the quality of labor. The quality of labor, excuse me, and the amount of capital and the technology that's available to them. So quality of labor depends on skills development, which in turn is a function of investment in human capital. Pag sinabing human capital, it's just like a crossover definition. We're talking about capital as a factor of production. And we just call everything capital. We just call labor human capital, but it's really a distinction between the two. The human capital is labor, and then there you have hard capital or financial capital, which is just capital. Better educated and more literate and better trained individuals are likely to be more productive and hence better quality of labor. So study well. Then don't focus on the awards. Develop skills. Kasi isa sa mga napapansin ko yung people think, or at the end of the day, you're going to be graduates of UP, but many of you are very grade conscious because you think that the higher grades will determine your future. The only reason that you might be offered a higher salary if you have a cum laude or something is because it's a signal. It shows, and being cum laude or whatever, to the employer who doesn't know you, who has no idea how productive you are, will need some information, and they think that because you have a laude at the end of your degree, in your diploma, it states in your diploma that you're probably more productive, meaning your marginal product of labor is high. That's just a signal. They could be totally wrong. If you have obtained your laude because you were begging for grades, etc., and it turns out you're not productive at all, and you're just, a grade chaser, then you're not going to be skilled. And so once you're hired and it turns out you're a dud, no, you're not a gem, you're a dud kasi okay, summa cum laude ito or whatever. Galing-galing nito sa on paper. Tapos nung pinagtatrabaho na, hindi makasulat, hindi maka-analyze, hindi marunong mag-discern ng mga, o di marunong mag-problem solve. Then your marginal product turns out that will be revealed and you're not really productive and your marginal product is really low pala. You'll either be fired or you'll be frozen, meaning your salary will be frozen. You won't get promoted, etc. So the lesson is that, okay, I don't have a problem if you're trying to have higher grades, but please concentrate on the skills as well. That you mustn't neglect the fact that you need to become better trained. All the things you're going to learn in college will not be the same skills you'll be using at work, but it will train you how to think, how to analyze, how to problem solve, which is going to be valuable when you become an employee or you become a member of the workforce. Even on a very rudimentary basis, kasi you're going to have better skills. Kasi yung skills na kakailanganin mo. Even if the company trains you, because you have their own system, etc. So learn as much as you can, but and also, learn to be skilled. Kasi yun naman ang point ng education. As in preparation to join the workforce, it's how to problem solve. So kung nangongopya ka lang palagi, you never really learned how to problem solve. Kasi nangongopya ka lang ng sagot. So in my view, you will become a dud. So sabi parang ako, false gem, parang false diamond ka pala kasi taas-taas ng grade mo pero hindi ka pala marunong mag-problem solve. So wala rin, mababa rin ang wage mo. As I said, ma-freeze ka lang, and I have seen that happen many times. I've seen like people, in many cases pa nga, I've seen people who didn't graduate with honors do so much better in the workforce than those who did, probably because they acquired training more than grades, or they're better at problem solving, or they're probably better motivated than those who were grade chasers. So the lesson of the story is that, okay, get good grades. That will become the initial signal for the employer to determine whether they're going to hire you or not. Remember, that's just a signal. If they find out that you're a fraud, that turns out that you only have high grades but you don't have good training or good skills, you will be frozen because you can't last there. You remember, you're being paid with the expectation that you're going to contribute revenues to the company that will be higher than the salary that you're getting. So you have to prove yourself. So, okay, all right. We'll end here because we only have 2 minutes left. We will continue this discussion on Thursday. So read up. This is chapter 13. We probably will finish this on Thursday and start chapter 14. So be prepared for that as well. Hindi it's a dark
Sir,
screen.
it's just dark black.
Right. Okay, I hope you can see the slide this time. Okay naman.
Okay na po.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think in last discussion we're talking about how labor is, how you as a person who's supplying labor, how do you get paid? I mean, how much money are you how can you expect to get paid? And I think sinabi na natin noon na how much you get paid really depends on how much you're contributing to the revenue of the company. Alright? Kasi and that depends in turn on your marginal product. No, so kung ibig sabihin ko ano yung contribution, kasi you're going to be the nth laborer. So if you're going to be the nth laborer, then then ang sweldo mo will depend on what your marginal contribution is going to be, meaning o yung additional na revenue na idadagdag mo doon sa kumpanya. Okay, so we call that, or we term that as the marginal revenue product. How much marginal revenue product you can expect to contribute, then that will be the basis of your salary or how much you're going to be paid. So logical naman yun, kasi bakit ka naman babayaran ng isang kumpanya ng isang salary na mas mataas kesa doon sa magiging contribution mo sa revenue ng kumpanya. Kaya sabi ko nga, mag-ingat sa mga matataas na sweldo kasi malaki ang expectation. Talagang ganon. Trade-off yan. But I wanted to clarify also that what we're talking about here is yung monetary compensation. Kasi wala naman tayong measure for the psychic compensation na tinatawag. O yung may term dyan, it's called psychic income. Alright, so psychic income as opposed to, or in addition to your monetary income. So note ko lang yung word na psychic income para meron kayong reference. So psychic income plus monetary income is your total income. Pero sa economics o sa ating pag-aaral, special field kasi yung nag-aaral ng psychic income. So this is not really counted sa ating discussion. It's just the monetary income. So itong monetary income na to ay related dun sa marginal revenue product. Okay? So, alright. Given that, so ang tanong naman is, what then, if that's the case, o kung yung pala ang magiging basis ng yung sweldo, di importanteng maintindihan natin kung paano mapapataas ang inyong marginal product o isang marginal product ng isang individual. So, what are the factors that determine the marginal product of labor? Pinag-usapan na rin natin to, sa quality of labor. Pag sinabing quality of labor, ibig sabihin training mo. Yung education mo, anong klase kang individual, ano isang klase ng tao. Hindi lang in terms of skill, no? In general, pati attitude yan eh. Kasi kung ikaw yung tipo ng taong madaling ma-discourage, then maaaring magkaroon ng, syempre, lagi namang may issue sa opisina, then mag-give up ka agad. And then you're not going to be productive. Alright? So, quality of labor, not only is in terms of skill, but also in terms of quality of you as a person. No? Kung ikaw isang dishonest na tao, hindi ka rin quality na labor kasi any moment na maaari kang mag-shirk, no? O yung ano ba to, pumuslit, yung hindi honest, hindi nagtatrabaho ng sapat. Alright? O maaaring nagnanakaw ka pa sa kumpanya o nandadaya ka sa oras. So, quality of labor is it not only encompasses yung skill, but also the quality of you as a person, kasi that also translates into productivity. The other is yung amount of capital, which means that yung amount of machinery or amount of, let's say, number of computers that you're working with, let's say you're working for a firm. So, yung productivity mo is also affected by the amount of technology that's available in the firm at saka yung number of machines, kasi the technology may be very advanced pero iisa lang yung computer nyo, isang advanced computer to be shared by 100 workers. I remember nung bago akong nagtatrabaho, bago-bago pa lang ang computer, matagal na to, many years ago, at dun sa department namin, I worked for a bank before, sa department namin iisa yung computer, so lahat kami nakapila. So hindi kami very productive. Nasabi ko, that's a prime example of how marginal productivity is affected by the amount of capital. Kasi dun sa opisina namin, there were like 10 of us, that we were all analysts. But they only had one computer kasi at that time, computers were quite expensive pa when I first graduated many, many moons ago. So meron kaming schedule lang kung tigi-isang oras lang kami dun. May computer time kami na tigi-isang oras lang kasi nag-share kami ng computer. So medyo mabagal. Mabagal kami magtrabaho and it was a necessity to go on overtime all the time kasi kulang nga yung oras sa isang araw. Nung nag-invest yung bank nung panahon na yon, nag-invest sa 5 computers, nag-shoot up ang productivity namin. We were able to take in more loan applications kasi we had 5 more computers, no? So we could work more. So that's an example. Yung marginal productivity namin shot up talaga kasi we now from 1 naging 5 computers yon. So it was like we had more computer time, diba? And so we could do more work, we could do more analysis and evaluation of loan applications. So tumaas yung productivity ng aming division. Okay, so yung quality of labor that is a function of your investment in human capital. So kung ikaw ay nag-train, as I said, no, binanggit ko na rin ito. Kaya pag nag-aaral kayo, please make sure that you learn something at hindi lang tumataas ang grado nyo. Kasi at the end of the day, when you're hired, that will surface. Yung grades nyo will only matter for you to get the job. But how you're going to excel in the workplace will really depend on how much you've learned or how much you were trained. Most of the things you learn in college, hindi nyo naman magagamit sa real world kasi may specific na requirements sa mga kumpanya o mga pagtatrabahuhan nyo na probably hindi nyo pinag-aralan sa college. Ang mahalaga doon ay yung disiplina o yung training, the way you think, the way you solve problems. Those are the things that you will need kasi you will be retrained when you enter the workforce kasi may kanya-kanyang sistema yung mga kumpanyang papasukan ninyo. Especially kung sa bangko, kanya-kanya ng systems yan eh. Ganun din naman I think sa mga marketing, etc. No? May mga kanya-kanyang sistema na yan, you would have to be retrained. Mahalaga na yung skill nyo as an individual, no, as a potential worker is there. Yun ang hinahabol nyo sa pag-aaral niyo. Kaya nga kung grado lang na grado iniisip nyo at hindi kayo nagko-concentrate sa training nyo, you will be at a disadvantage when you enter the workforce. So as a whole, no, try to be as educated and as all around as possible because all of these things, even your personal qualities, will translate into productivity. So a person who's like, more, who's really good at writing, yung hindi naman yung magaling kang magsulat, magaling kang magsalita, magaling kang mag-present. Lahat ng yan magko-convert into products and revenues. And so that is a function that will determine your quality as a laborer or as a person who supplies labor. Okay, now this entire understanding or this entire topic that we're discussing explains or will enlightens us as to why there are differences in wages across countries or even across disciplines. All right, so for instance, it's been noted that wage in the Philippines is lower than that of the US not because the Americans are smarter than the Filipinos. It's just that they are more productive than the Filipinos because the demand curve for labor in the Philippines is lower than that in the US. Okay. Halimbawa, ito yung graphical explanation yan eh. Ang Philippines labor market nasa kaliwa, yung US labor market nasa kanan. Notice that if we had like the same exact supply curve, so yung color blue, but ang demand curve for labor in the States is higher. Why? Because the demand curve is a function, is the representation of the marginal revenue product, which in turn is a function of the marginal productivity of labor. Diba? So because American workers are more productive because they have more machines, they have in general, this is the labor market. So huwag kayong ma-offend. Sabihin mga taga-UP kasing gagaling ng mga taga-states. Oo, but we're talking about labor market in general. So it's not specific to a field. Alright, so dahil yung marginal revenue product curve ng Amerika ay mas mataas kaysa sa marginal revenue product ng sa Pilipinas, dahil nga mas mataas ang productivity ng mga Amerikano, dahil nga din mas marami silang capital, etc., no, yung mga factors that we just discussed regarding what could affect marginal productivity of labor, then the intersection of demand and supply, which determines wage, is going to be higher for the United States. So tingnan nyo yung graph na to. Sa kanan ng intersection ng demand and supply, which is WUS, ay mas mataas kesa dun sa W Philippines na nasa kaliwa. Alright, so this graphical representation tells us or gives us an idea as to how wages are determined, and also explains or partly explains why the wage rate in the United States is higher than in the Philippines. So wage differential is due to higher education level in the US and in the Philippines. In general. Then number two, or the second reason, is very hard to refute, which is that Filipinos have less capital goods. We have less machines, we have less communication infrastructure, we have less roads, our internet is, much to be desired. As a result, the Americans are more productive than the Filipinos. So that explains why their marginal revenue product line is higher than ours, and so their wage is higher than ours. All right, the general finding is that countries that invest in education and additional capital goods shift their marginal product and the demand curves to the right. All right, so this has been the case for South Korea and Taiwan, which now have wage rates that are double than what they had 20 years ago. So isa naman yan sa mga bagay na pinagtutuunan ng pansin ng pamahalaan. Hindi lang ng kasalukuyang administrasyon kung pinagtutuunan man nga ng pansin, but ng mga nakakaraang administrasyon pa. Kaya nga naman malaki ang budget sa education. Siguro na lang ang kailangan pagsuriin dito ay ano ang kailangang edukasyon na magpapataas ng antas ng kalidad ng mga mamamayan. No? So ang naisip nila ay dagdagan nga yung K-12, gawing K-12, no? Kasi nung bago nang nag-K-12, ang ano lang kami, ang total of 10 years lang ang secondary school, no? So ngayon nadagdagan ng 2. Maaaring makatulong, maaaring hindi ko pa alam, hindi ako familiar sa literature sa education at sa impact nito sa productivity, but I imagine na magiging positive naman yon. So ang aking hope lang, kasi remember na sinabi ko na ang kalidad ng laborer ay hindi lamang in terms of skill and productivity, but also overall as a person. So I think there should be more investment, for instance, doon sa resilience ng mga kabataan, no, to help them cope with challenges, to have a better sense of how it is to be resilient, because that will also affect productivity. Because if napansin ko kasi, for instance, na parang mas mataas ang mental health issues ngayon kaysa doon sa mga nakaraang henerasyon. And maaaring ito ay kailangan pagtuunan ng pansin kasi nga nag-iiba ang mundo kaysa noon. So I think that as part of investing in education, hindi lang in terms of skill, but also in terms of resilience, because resilience can be learned. Yung how we cope with problems, how we cope with day-to-day living is learned. That can be learned. Hindi siya parang pinanganak lang ako na ganito. Hindi. I don't think that's accurate. There are possible ways to make that happen. No? May mga cases of course na hindi. But that's a different story altogether. But there are cases na pwedeng matutunan no? kung nagkaroon lang ng siguro more knowledge, more training siguro. No? I'm not an expert on this, but this is just based on what I've read. Okay, so another is that there needs to be more capital goods that our workers can work with. So observation nga is that when Taiwan and South Korea engage in these two activities, which is investing in education and increasing the capital goods access, or the access of workers to capital goods, excuse me, tumaas ang marginal productivity ng mga Taiwanese at ng mga South Koreans, and as a result, tumaas ang kanilang wages, tumaas yung marginal revenue product nila. Okay, so dito naman tayo doon sa issue ng supply. So yung sa supply, dahil kayo ang gumagawa naman ng desisyon, tayo ang gumagawa ng desisyon kung ilang oras ang gusto natin magtrabaho, or how many hours we can or want to work over the course of time. Now, in general, I think people want to work yung full hours. No? So, that's 8 hours a day. So in a week, 40 hours a week yon kung 5 days yung pasukan. No? So that's a full load. Kumbaga, that's when you're fully employed. Job and 20 hours a week lang, or maybe half day lang siya sa isang trabaho. So for some people, they take on more than one job. So now there's also the issue that there are jobs that remain idle. Normally, these are the things that nobody wants to do. No? So yung mga trabaho na either mahirap or mapanganib. Alright? So paano kapag may mga ganitong sitwasyon? Iba ang analysis naman natin pagka merong mga trabaho na parang mga panganib, or merong nakakadiri. No? Minsan naalala ko nung ako'y high school, mahilig kaming mag-makeup ng hindi kami mag-makeup, gumawa kami ng mga trabaho na walang may gusto. Hindi ko alam kung bakit, like katrabaho ka daw sa QI, Quezon Institute, etc. Mga nakakadiring trabaho na pinag-usapan namin, magkano para pumayag kang magtrabaho sa Quezon Institute na kung saan may mga kaso ng mga nakakahawang sakit. Para magtrabaho ka doon, magkano tatanggapin mong sweldo? So, similar to this discussion. So there are jobs that nobody wants, in which case in order to entice people to take on that job, higher wages, a wage differential or a wage premium is offered. Okay, so we'll talk about it a little bit. No? Sambawa noon, nung umpisa ng giyera sa Afghanistan, ang sinusweldo estudyante pa ako noon sa Amerika ako. Pag pinag-uusapan pag nabubisit na kami sa ginagawa namin, sabi na mag-janitor tayo sa Afghanistan kasi kumikita daw ng 10,000 a month ang janitor sa Afghanistan, $10,000 a month ang janitor sa Afghanistan. Kasi naman katatapos lang ng 9/11 noon, yung kasasabog lang ng Twin Towers, napaka-dangerous, napaka-mapanganib nung pumunta sa Afghanistan. Kaya totoong ang laki ng sweldo ng janitor sa Afghanistan. Kasi nobody wants to go to Afghanistan kasi mapanganib. But that shows you that type of job, the nature of the job, could offer yung tinatawag na wage premium. Kasi obviously, ang janitor, hindi naman karaniwang sumusweldo ng $10,000 isang buwan. Pero dahil mapanganib yung lugar, at mawawalay ka sa pamilya mo ng matagal, then may wage differential. No? Tapos yung pang $10,000 na yung libre pa daw ang tinahan nun, etc. No? So kami nun parang wag na tayo mag-aral, mag-janitor tayo sa Afghanistan. Of course, joke lang naman yun. All right, so now, in terms of decision as to how you're going to allocate your hours, essentially, kasi we only have 24 hours in a day. A portion of that is devoted to sleep. So sleeping, eating, etc. No? So let's say total nun is 8 hours. No, so you have 16 hours left to divide between income and leisure. So ibig sabihin income, it's either you're working or you're not. No, so sleep kasi isn't really considered leisure kasi body function yan eh. So kailangan mong matulog, kailangan mong kumain. So non-negotiable yon. Kailangan ka matulog ng so many hours. So yung natitira mong oras, waking hours I mean, ay hahatiin mo sa dalawa. It's either magtatrabaho ka or hang out with your family or your friends, or you're going to engage in your hobby, etc. Watch a movie, go to park, etc. Travel, etc. That's leisure. So that decision, it's really it boils down to how much. What is your decision regarding how many number of hours are you going to work, and how many number of hours are you going to keep for yourself and engage in leisure. Now, Pat, when wage increases, the opportunity cost of leisure increases, and making a person more oriented, or I guess lean, or making a person lean more towards working than engaging in something pleasurable or something like a vacation. Now, ano bang opportunity cost ulit? If you recall, opportunity cost ay yung value ng second best option. So ibig sabihin, kasi dalawa lang naman yan. So kung hindi ka nagtatrabaho, you're engaging in leisure. Now, kapag ka tumataas ang sweldo, ibig sabihin, if you had devoted your, let's say, an extra hour to working, dati ang wage rate ay, let's say, per hour, let's say, 500. Laki nun, teka muna. Let's say, sige na, 500 na lang para madaling calculate. 500 dati per hour ang wage. Now, so ibig sabihin, if you choose not to work and engage, let's say, in 1 hour na yon, sana imbis na nagtrabaho ka, you hang out with your friends. So yung 1 hour na yon, meaning ang cost ng hanging out with your friends is 500 pesos kasi that's the amount of money you forgo in order to spend more time with your friends, an extra hour. Now, when that wage from 500 became 1,000, then the opportunity cost of leisure went up. Kasi dati, sabihin, the amount of money that you had to forgo in order to spend more time with your friends. And then you think about, are my friends worth that much? Okay, then sabihin, worth it pa sila. Sige, 1,000 naging 10,000 an hour. Then probably you will shift to working, and parang they will maintindihan ka na ng kaibigan mo. Hindi ka muna mag-hang out with them for another hour kasi 10,000 pesos yung mapuforgo mo na income if you hang out with them for another hour. So that decision regarding how much work and how much leisure you're going to do is really dependent on what is the opportunity cost or what is the wage that you're forgoing. Now, we can theoretically we can divide these two things, the effect of a wage increase, as into two effects. One is called the substitution effect. So this is when higher wage, leisure becomes more expensive relative to work. So the individual will substitute more work over leisure. Substitution effect siya. As a result of the wage increase, there's this pull towards more work in order to earn that extra income. So the cost of leisure just went up. But there's also the income effect. No? Ito kailangan ng imagination ng konti. The substitution effect is kind of second nature to most people, especially to students. It's easy to imagine the substitution effect and it's easy to imagine how attractive it is to work more when the wage is, let's say, doubled. So that's easy to imagine. The harder to imagine is this thing called income effect, which is when a person receives a higher wage, this individual feels richer. So meaning that he feels that he can now afford better things in life. As a result of a higher salary, this leisure, which we can consider, we can regard as a good, can now be bought because there's this income effect. Now you feel richer. You feel that as a result of this higher wage, or because of you have so much money now, that you can now afford the better things in life. The good quality life, and good quality. One of the components of one of the features of good quality life is to be able to enjoy life better. So as a result, this income effect will pull you towards more leisure because you can now afford it. So when there's a wage increase, there's this tug of war between substitution and income effect. So in other words, kapag ka nagkaroon ng pagtaas ng sweldo, isipin nyo na lang na that these are the two sentiments generally that the person might have. Of course, some would argue that there would be others, but theoretically, really, we can combine. We can categorize the sentiment towards a wage increase into two. It's either you want to work more, or you can afford more. You can afford good things, as a result of the wage increase, and so you probably will reduce your number of hours in order to engage in more leisure, because you can now travel. Now, with a wage increase, now you feel like when let's say you were starting out, let's say, as a result of when you were starting out, you're only getting paid maybe 25,000 pesos a month, and then then you're asked, would you like to be promoted? You'll be paid 50,000 pesos a month if you get promoted. Kasi remember, when you get promoted, it means you'll have more work. There's no such thing as, I can't remember. Maybe someone who told me that they think that when you get promoted, you'll have less work. That is impossible. When you get promoted, you will do more work. You probably will do less tedious work, less of the work that you didn't enjoy before. But you will work some more. Remember the marginal revenue product principle, the marginal revenue product phenomenon. You can't get paid for something that or for revenues that's less than how much you got paid for, diba? So when you get promoted, it essentially means you're committing to more hours of work. Okay, so from 25,000, you're now 50,000 pesos. Then you get promoted again. Let's say let's say you were staff, and now you became assistant manager, 50,000. Now you're becoming assistant vice president, and now you're going to get paid 100,000 a month. You probably will still buy because I want to get promoted. I'm willing to work, more hours. But as vice president, since you're getting more, you now have at least 100,000 pesos a month. You can now afford, good things, or more expensive things. And one of which is travel. Now you can travel. You can go see the world. You can go to Europe, whatever. And so if they offer you overtime, let's say, oh, you're assistant vice president, we'll give you overtime. So give more work, but we'll pay you more. You probably will decline and say, ano naman, taas na ng sweldo ko, okay na yan. I need more leisure now. Kasi if you think about it, as you work more, leisure becomes more and more enticing to you. As you have less time for the things that you value, like leisure, because that's a break. So that means time with your family, time with your friends, personal time, watching a movie, traveling, etc. As you engage in more work, you gain more income. Income becomes less and less enticing to you, and you want to travel, or have friends, date or something. But so you find additional or even increases in wage less enticing because leisure is now becoming very dear, no, very parang kasi di ba, parang ano yan, the absence makes the heart grow fonder, no? If you have less leisure, you really need personal time, it becomes more urgent for you, and so you're willing to give up more wage or additional wage in order to uh, gain more leisure or to engage in more pleasurable activities. So this is the basis for what is called the backward bending supply curve. Now, this backward bending supply curve is a situation wherein the individual feels very rich because of his very high wage that he decides to buy more leisure as his wage rises more because he can now afford it. So this is normal. This is normal behavior of people. I mean, at the end of the day, diba, we strike na this work-life balance. That's the trend now. Well, it shouldn't be a trend. It should be how it is. There should be a balance between work and life. So and then it's a question of when can you afford to enjoy life more. I mean, there's more to life than just making money, diba? I think very few people would refute that that's true, that there's really more to life than just making money. So as a person or as individuals earn more, it's normal to feel that they'd like to engage in more leisure, and they can afford it because they have now a very high salary. So in this case, the income effect completely dominates the substitution effect, and the individual exhibits what we call a backward bending supply curve. And how does that look? Like this. So you'll notice that in the beginning, when the wage rate was not too high yet, all right, the supply curve, the quantity of labor that will be supplied is upward sloping, meaning that people are enticed to work more, or an individual is enticed to work more when the wage or when the salary or he or she is offered a higher salary. So the um, supply curve is upward sloping in the beginning. Then there comes a point when the wage rate is so high, the wage, and this person is making so much money that any additional increase in wage actually entices him to work, to not accept it actually kasi tumaas na yung sweldo niya eh. Hindi na niya tatanggapin pa yung additional work, but actually it makes him uh, uh, devote less of his hours to working. Remember that income plus leisure is equal to total waking hours. Eh? So dati, whenever wage rate increases, the number of hours allocated for income grows, diba? And this person, to take advantage of the higher wage, reduces his number of hours of leisure. But with higher wages this time, the wage rate, the number of hours for income generation is reduced, and the person engages in more leisure. As a result, the quantity of labor available as wages increase becomes less, and the labor is the only quote unquote commodity that I know that exhibits a backward bending supply. So this is illustrated in the graph. This what we call the backward bending supply curve. This wage star is the critical point C. All right, that flips the supply curve from being positive to being negative. So ibig sabihin, as the wage increases, the individual wants to work less. It makes sense. I know it's for some people, that happened. Parang hindi ko matanggap. Because the wage now, every increase pa ng wage, mataas yung wage, di ba? Nai-entice siya to work less kasi ang laki na ng kinikita niya in the first place. Hindi na siya nai-entice hindi na siya na-attract sa mas maraming oras kasi masyado na siyang mayaman o masyado na malaki ng kinikita niya. It's too much. No? It's a normal people would have a satiation point. Normal, when I say normal, yung rational, regular person, it's kind of unusual for a person to be so enthralled with money. So that additional money makes him want to engage in uh, more work or more activity. It is the same thing that I think about when politicians are corrupt. Kasi di ba, politicians are corrupt because they want to make money, and one would think that they would devote less hours for corruption um, when they have amassed so much money. Because I mean, money. How much money does any person need anyway? But for some people, it's parang walang satiation, walang pagkabusog, ika nga. Hindi nabubusog kahit na anong kain. Hindi nabubusog kahit anong dami ng pera meron na siya. Kailangan pang mas marami. That to me is unusual. That's kind of not, for lack of a better term, it's quite not normal. Kasi may satiation kami pagkasawa eh. Diba? Merong bang bagay sa buhay mo na wala kang pagkasawa? Pretty much, theoretically meron eh. Na maaring malaki yung amount bago ka magsawa, pero may magsasawa at magsasawa ka rin. So kapag hindi ka nagsasawa, I think there's something off. Even money, how much money do you really want and how much money do you really need? Why do you need, let's say, kung meron ka bang $10 billion, will you think na, oh, hindi, $10 billion isn't enough. I need $100 billion. It may happen accidentally, but it's not something that you pursue. No? Kasi some people get more money because the value of their stocks change. Kasi katulad yung sina Bill Gates and all, yung lumalaki yung lumalaki yung assets nila dahil nagpapalit yung price ng kanilang assets, ng stocks. But I don't think it's actively pursued na parang, si Bill Gates is so unhappy with his billions or something. If he's a normal person, I can't imagine. Nung nag-divorce yung mag-asawa, the wife donated a chunk of that yung settlement nila to charity because she said na, how much money does anybody need anyway? How much food can you eat? How much traveling can you do? How much jewelry can you buy? And it can make you happy. So satiation is the issue. Now,
Okay, guys. It's time. So I guess we can end here. So this May 9 is election day. So please vote your conscience. No. Don't just think of yourselves and your family when you vote. Think of the country as well. So that's like my parting words na for this national elections. So see you all on Thursday and have a great day ahead.